So just go over it then, because we've got a couple people who stepped in. So talk about each of the pieces then, and I'm going to let you guys actually do the teaching of it, since we've already discussed it again. So the first thing that we did in our in-hand
was stretch.
The stretch. And the lengthen. Okay. Slight bend in the neck.
Right, the slight bend in the neck to the point where the eye is maybe in line with the shoulder. Right, so we're talking a really slight bend. Okay, anything more, particularly when we're starting out like this, has a tendency to put the horse onto the inside shoulder. Okay, so we're unbalancing the horse, and that's the opposite of the idea that we're after when we do this. Okay, so then we went into our position 1. Where are we in position 1?
Facing the horse.
Facing the horse.
The center of the wheel.
The center of the wheel. Absolutely.
Walking backwards.
And slightly walking backwards.
Small
yes.
steps.
Tiny steps. Absolutely. Because we want what on his part? On the horse's part.
We want him to be crossing over, staying as straight to us as possible.
He's the spoke.
Yes, he's the spoke of the wheel, right? We want him engaging the hind leg. We also want him to be very slow and intentional in the process, because we know that tension is going to cause the horse two things. It's going to cause him to rush, right? And it's going to cause him to come out of the stretch position.
And in that situation, we're not looking for the whoosh. We're looking for an intentional movement.
Yes, a nice, slow, methodical, intentional movement. And so if we're in position 1, we're asking for the movement, and we lose the stretch, what do we do?
Stop and go back to the beginning.
We just go right back to that first step, okay? The idea is we never leave one to go to the next. We carry it with us, okay? So that if something gets messed up down the ladder, we go back down the ladder to readdress it, okay? So position 1, we're coming backwards, horse is coming around into us, engaging the hind leg, okay? Position 2, where are we?
In the pocket.
We're in the pocket of the neck.
We're in the pocket of the neck, or we're even in the same position, but we've changed our body angle, right? So that now, don't fall off that, don't get bucked off. So that now we're then in what position on the wheel?
The tread.
We're the tread of the wheel, okay? So if we were, say, position 1, we are here. Our horse is here, stepping around us this way, okay? When we go to position 2, we're in the same place, but we're positioning around here. So the horse's tail, more or less, becomes the center of that wheel, and we become the tread. Okay, that gives you a better picture, like you were talking about, Lori, of knowing where your feet need to be, or Lisa. Sorry. So then from position 2, we go into shoulder in. What was the difference between position 1 and shoulder in?
Our position.
Our position, right? Because the horse's feet are moving the same way. Okay. So position 1, position 2 are really kind of gross motor skills for us, and making sure that the horse physically, emotionally is able to handle that. Okay. And then we carry that again, position 1 into the shoulder in, position 2, the counter shoulder in. Okay. So we come back kind of in that pocket of the neck, eventually getting back to more our riding position, okay, when we're asking for those moves.
And staying focused on where we want to go.
Exactly. So to begin with, it's about unlocking the horse's body, helping us understand where we need to move, helping us to feel that flow that we talked about, okay? And then shoulder in, counter shoulder in, we can focus on where we're headed, so we can actively take the horse somewhere, basically, in that position. And that's then when we started using the patterns, the combinations, and kind of the dance got started there. And then for those of you who weren't in here when we did it, this is just the breakdown of the basic pattern that we did yesterday. Okay. Thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, remarks, requests for clarification on that? You guys got all that? Okay, cool. So now we're gonna talk about what we did today. I smudge it all up.
You get him some more paper towels.
I can get them one more.
There's some more in the cabinet.
Cool, thank you.
That's much better.
So then, yesterday was all in hand. Today we started in hand and then started carrying it over into the mounted work. Okay? But what did we start with this morning?
The in-hand work.
So we got them unlocked to begin with. So it was a review of yesterday. And then we went into more the flexions. Right? The flexions and the releases of the jaw. Okay. So we're thinking about... I gotta keep that to the side. If we're thinking about our horse, when we're talking about the releases of the jaw, the bit rings, when we first asked for the release, where did we ask for that?
Just one side
One
straight
side.
up.
One side straight up. Okay, so we're going to say we've got our snaffle bit on our horse. To release the jaw itself, for the mobilization in the jaw, just elevating the bit ring up into the lips, right? And the only thing we're looking for right there is just a basic working of the mouth, the basic kind of licking and chewing idea. Okay? From there, so we'll put that in here. Our jaw release. And why is that part important? What's that get us started with?
Releasing the hyoid.
Releasing the hyoid,
TM.
releasing the tension,
TMJ.
allowing us then to gain access
TMJ.
to the TMJ, giving us access then through the occiput to the rest of the body. Okay, so that jaw release is the key that unlocks the rest of it. Okay, it's the magic key that unlocks the door. So we did that, of course, from both sides. Okay, upward into the lips to make sure left and right. Okay, because then when we're riding, the inside rein is the one that's going to unlock the jaw. Okay. Once we did that, then we asked for the lateral release. Okay. Where did we go with the bit ring for the lateral release?
Almost toward the ear.
Slightly outward.
Slightly outward. Yeah, the
Oh,
jaw release
sorry.
upward, the lateral release slightly
Okay.
outward. Okay. What did we do after the lateral release?
It's behind.
The upward, so the elevated release. Right? In the lateral release, we're just looking for the horse to release from the occiput, okay, from the base of the head, okay. Then we went into the elevated release.
And then added the lateral to that, right?
Yes, absolutely. So in the elevated release, how did we ask for that? That's dangerous.
Towards the ear.
Towards the ear.
Both.
Both.
Right.
Bingo. Yeah.
Sorry.
So towards the ear with both. So elevated release is both bit rings coming upward toward the ear until what?
Elevation of the lower neck.
Elevation, that base of the neck, that thoracic sling starting to engage. Absolutely. So the lateral release, how big did we say a movement that is?
Slide.
Tiny.
Tiny. It's the eyelashes, right? When we talk about pole flexion, so I brought Janet in to talk with us about this. When we talk about pole flexion, you can see the atlas where it connects into the occiput, the atlanto-occipital joint, okay? You see these pieces on the skull here, okay? There's very limited movement there. Okay, so if I'm holding the neck still and flexing just the head, that's maximum flexion. In fact, there'd be cartilage and such in here, so there'd be a little less movement than that. So we're literally talking from center, 1/2 inch, max 3/4 of an inch movement from center. Okay, so it's very literally eyelashes right, eyelashes left. Anything more, and it can't happen here, right? So the rest of the neck becomes involved. And the horse can brace in the occiput and just bring the rest of the neck around. So that's why we were so focused on isolating that joint and just getting that piece there, okay, to isolate and unlock the occiput, okay, atlanto-occipital joint. What we mostly talk about is pole flexion, right? And we know the pole's just the bump, the protuberance at the top of the skull sits underneath the foretop. But when we talk about pole flexion, we know that's what we're talking about. Okay. And then the elevated release. How much did we ask for with that?
Start with just a try.
Start with a try. Whatever they offer. Whatever they could offer at this point, right? And some of them came up enough to where they were kind of at their maximum for what their thoracic sling was able to do. And where did they start to go from there? Gene, your horse was doing it. As he was up.
He was also
Up and coming round, releasing through the neck, and then he got to a point where he couldn't come anymore, so where did he go?
down.
Down and or backwards, right? Started stepping backwards, okay? That's pretty common. Some of the horses, before they would release, because they weren't quite understanding of it, they would step backwards, so you hang out with them until they start to adjust their posture a little bit and come upwards, okay? And then from the elevated release, then we started asking for the lateral release again to make sure that in that posture we can keep the looseness, okay? And then from there, what did we go into from that?
Looking for the eventual 90 degrees flexion.
I just have a quick question for you. On the elevated release, when we're into the lateral, are we supposed to turn them first and then elevate, or elevate and then ask for the bend?
Elevate and then
Okay.
lateral release.
That's what I wanna make
yeah,
sure.
good, very good. And eventually, as they become more and more unlocked, we can get either in either. We can do either one first. We can do it in any sequence, okay? But for right now, it's easier for the horses to understand in that natural progression that way. So then we talked about the 90 degrees. So once we got the elevated release and the lateral release coming in, then we asked for the elevated release to be accompanied with lateral flexion, okay? Now, what was our limit for the lateral flexion?
90 degrees.
90 degrees, okay? Because if we've got our horse
He's a bubbly horse.
He's a what?
Bubbly horse.
He's a bubbly horse, yeah. So if we've got our horse here and we go beyond, so our 90 degrees would be there, okay? If we go beyond 90 degrees, what happens?
Push the shoulder.
Yeah, all the weight's going to end up coming into that inside shoulder, okay? And we know as a horse moves, when they're carrying themselves around, It's the inside hind leg and the outside shoulder that are the balancers. Okay? The inside hind being the primary driver. Inside hind and outside shoulder. When we bend more than 90 degrees, where does the balance end up going? To the inside shoulder. Right? So now, is he in balance or out of balance?
Out of balance.
He's out of balance because the weight's being positioned into the wrong leg. And of course we did all this standing still first so that you could have the horse unlocked and you could feel what's going on. But then eventually we get to doing this under saddle, and same idea, we want to make sure that we limit that to no more than 90 degrees because it throws the balance to the inside. Now we also found, Carla, with your horse, we might have had 45 degrees maximum for what she could presently do without becoming unbalanced. That's okay. We work into that progressively. Okay? Body condition, past life experience, other training, typical balance, conformation, anatomy, that can all have an effect on that. Okay? For right now, Carla's horse can't go any deeper. We wouldn't be taking Lily any deeper because of the same reason. She's very heavy in the front end anyway, so she's going to have that tendency to want to drop to that inside shoulder, okay, because of being heavier balanced on the forehand anyway. Okay, so it's not saying we have to get 90 degrees when we start this. No way. We get up to 90 degrees in a natural progression, piece by piece, layer by layer, little bit by little bit, as the horse is confident and understanding.
And back more on the hind end, they would be able to.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The better they bear the weight on the haunches, which is associated with the elevated release and the forward movement, okay? Because if we get forward movement, but we don't get an elevation of the thoracic sling, what do we have? Forehand. We have a wedge, right? Okay. You can drive him forward all you want, but if you're driving him forward and he's not engaging the thoracic sling, you're just creating a wedge, okay? And then he's going to be more on the forehand anyway, and any bend or flexion is going to cause him then to be more unbalanced and on the forehand. Okay, so that just becomes a progressive cycle. So we're starting out now saying, look, we've got our foundation, now it's time to advance beyond this a little bit. It's time to do a little bit more. Stand up. It's like we're all grandma walking behind the grandson saying, stand up, eyes up, shoulders back, walk straight, spit out that damn gum, whatever, right? We're starting to change and make adjustments to their posture, okay? And you'll see your horses, as you do this, they'll begin to get a little taller. They'll begin to engage more of that thoracic sling. Okay? And that's the piece. We can have as much drive as we want from the haunches, but if we don't get an elevation of the thoracic sling, you're not going to get collection. You're not going to get him off the forehand if you can't get that to happen with the drive. Okay, so that's why understanding these pieces is important.
Without throwing the hind quarter out behind you, because then you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's about putting all of it together.
Right.
Just doing that on the circle that you had us doing, I can see going home and being able to practice that, but how Lily got so out of balance just from a little bit of using that lateral flexion on the circle too.
Yep, absolutely. And that's where then too, the circle exercise that we did, we're asking for all of those things in movement also on the circle. Straight, right? We started straight, and then we asked for it on the circle. So we're thinking eyelashes in. So tiny movement of the head, eyelashes in. Eyelashes out, tiny movement. Okay? And then carrying on a little bit more from there. Right? What you'll find a lot of times is the stiffness in the jaw, that isolating the occiput, going eyelashes left, eyelashes right, as you're going on the circle, that's oftentimes enough to really help to get a lot of unlocking, particularly if we have the jaw released as we do it. Okay. Yep.
And the eyelashes we were giving with the outside.
Yeah, more than pulling. When we've got a steady contact, release the right side, eyelashes will tilt left. But don't release too much, because then what happens?
They go too far.
Exactly, they go too far. They go into a big, deep bend.
Okay.
And I kept finding myself doing this. But you're only supposed to move one hand.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's really
So it's a
hard.
holding of, in this case we'll say it's a holding of the left, a slight releasing of the right, okay? And again, think, 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch to get those eyelashes to the side, little bit of a movement with your hand, okay? And maybe to start out we have to exaggerate by pushing a few inches, okay? Eventually, soften your fingers. Soften your fingers and the horse will give through the eyelashes. Soften the other fingers, they'll give through the eyelashes. So when we talked about hide it from me, right, and you were on the circle, I said don't let me see what you're doing. That's when you get a lot smaller with it, and you can feel that horse start to, you know, unlock through the occiput there. And then you started to see kind of the crest rolling on some of our horses, right, as they were going through that, unlocking the nuchal ligament, unlocking the whole way through the top line. Yep. Super important. It's not just cram them together, okay? And as we went through these, as we started working, Jane, your horse especially, really started loosening through the back, right? You felt a lot more mobility through your seat. And then when he came loose through the back, he came to the bit, right? He was having a hard time holding it because as soon as he did, he felt like he might have been wrong, so he got a little stiff in the back again and then came up. But when we talk about putting the horse on the bit or bringing the horse to the bit, it's not about bringing the bit to the horse, right? It's about suppling the spine, loosening the top line, and then the horse comes to the bridle from there. Yeah. So when we talk about the horse being on the bit, if we let the bit become the focus, we're going at it backwards. Okay? That's when we're talking about riding from front to back instead of from back to front. Okay? If we think about loosening up the top line, loosening up, mobilizing the occiput, all that stuff, it allows the whole top line to be softer. More movement comes from the back. Okay? And remember then we started talking about, see if we can do these things without the tempo changing. Okay? So then we know we're keeping balance and we're keeping energy in there. The tempo doesn't have to be fast, but it needs to be consistent. And when we had the consistency in the tempo, the consistency in the balance, and we were getting the suppleness through the top line, then the horse comes to the bridle naturally. They will all seek it when we do that because they're stretching and lengthening through the top line. Okay.
You had us though use our hands, lift, so that there's elevation, and then the other hand was getting the lateral.
Getting the lateral flexion. Absolutely.
So it was a little different than what you just talked about with the hands. Being a little bit of give.
Yes, so the little bit of give is the lateral release, right, to make sure that that's unlocked. And then the more active hands is for the lateral flexion. We had the outside hand asking for what?
Elevation.
Elevation. Outside hand asking for basically the elevated release, okay? And then the inside hand asking for the flexion, okay? If we're going to the right, the outside left hand says lift and come up. Inside hand says, and give me that flexion.
Do we start out lifting both though? And then...
We did.
Okay.
Yes, we started to, because once we did this on the ground and then we climbed on and went through all of these again.
Right.
Okay.
And then we would start with both and then drop the one where we wanted the bend.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. Saying come up and then start to soften laterally. Absolutely. Yep. And again, this is flexions. This is to unlock kind of the jaw, the neck, so that we're able to get to the back. The difference between flexion and bend. Bend happens through the entirety of the spine. Okay. Bend happens through the entirety of the spine. It's initiated and maintained through the seat and the leg. Okay. Flexion happens in the head and the neck. It's initiated and maintained by the reins. Okay. Flexion and bend are not the same thing. Okay.
Say those again.
Oh, say those again.
Bend.
The bend happens through the length of the spine, the entirety of the spine. Okay. It's created and maintained by the seat and the legs.
Okay.
Okay. Flexion happens in the head and the neck. Okay. Sometimes just the head, if we're looking, like we said, for those lateral releases. Okay. But it's flexion is head and neck, and that's created and maintained through the rein contact.
Okay.
So if we're trying to get a bend and we're pulling with our reins, you're not going to get it. You might get a flexion, but you're not going to get a bend. going to get a true bend. And that bend comes by releasing the top line. Again, we can go back to talking about the in-hand work that we did, lengthening the body, creating the bend so that we would say that it would feel as though there's an even degree of flexion between all of the vertebrae in the horse's spine, right? Now we know that can't happen because we know there's no flexibility in the sacrum, there's almost no flexibility in the withers, that, you know, that sort of thing. But you'd feel as though the horse is right on that geometry that you're trying to ride when you've got an even bend. Make sense?
You talked too about getting the elevated release and then allowing them to stretch. So can you just touch on that just a bit more as you're riding?
Absolutely. So as we're
To
riding,
get
the stretch part, and that goes into the in-hand work a little bit that we did, finding that stretch, finding that release, that's going to unlock the back. A lot of our horses, especially our horses that tend to be heavier on the forehand, when we start to bring them up into a better posture, we're activating muscles they're not used to using. Okay? So it's important that we allow the release after that. We can lengthen the neck, or we can give them a full, complete stretch. Okay? But just like if we go to the gym, we don't hold a bicep curl for an hour because we know that wouldn't do anything for developing our muscles. It would just tear your body apart. Okay? It's the contraction and the extension that builds muscle. Okay? It's the same thing with your horse. Stand up, lift that thoracic sling, engage your haunches, go to here, and then go out. That's a set, right? Or a rep, right? Like if you're going to the gym. Like we said, you are your horse's fitness coach. Okay? Some horses are going to need more of that in order to be able to hold that balance. Some horses are going to need less. Okay? The horses that are more naturally balanced can more naturally, more readily go to work on these things and hold the frame, hold the balance longer than others. Okay? The horses that are more on the forehand probably need a lot more reps, right? A lot more sets, a lot more practice until they get stronger doing that. Okay? And then we've got some horses that are naturally built more downhill. Okay? Those horses will likely always struggle to hold for a length of time in comparison to the horse that's naturally built uphill anyway. Okay? And so there's just a lot of work conditioning those muscles, getting them there. And you get to where you can hold for longer and longer before you release, right? That's just the horse. That's just how he's built. That's the development of muscles. Okay, that's normal.